Hi, good morning, Barb McQuade. What do you think of Steve Austin Bionic Rescue Dog?
Steve Austin Bionic Rescue Dog is going to cause us all to die from cuteness.
Thank you. Thank you.
He's adorable.
Is that is that a legal defense I have? That if I murder people with my dog's cuteness? Wow, Barb, where should we start today? I give you first of all credit for not just bursting into laughter on TV and going, "Are you kidding me?" Some of these. Lynn Wood is one of the Trump election lawyers, right? What is her name?
Sidney Powell.
Sidney Powell.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been watching this whole thing. You said watching the court hearing for sanctions against Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, etc., for frivolous lawsuit filed against Michigan election officials. So far, the defense is to run. Powell claims she was not served with a motion. Wood claims he didn't draft the complaint. Court asks a basic question: what legal authority is there for court to decertify states' election results? Response is some vague reference to Bush v. Gore. Court says the decision stands for the direct opposite. Have you ever witnessed anything quite like this in your legal career, this whole thing?
No, I really haven't. It is, as you say, parts of it are amusing, but actually it's really disturbing to see people trying to abuse the court system like this. And to the end, the judge held a 6-hour hearing, and she did a great job. She ran it like a deposition, really pinning them down about the factual basis for each of these affidavits that they filed, and they really had none. And even though they were exposed as filing this baseless lawsuit, Sidney Powell said at the end, "I would do it again." They are completely unremorseful. And as the judge said, it seems like the goal here isn't to win this litigation. It is to convince the public that there was something wrong in Michigan when there's absolutely no evidence of it.
Yeah. Here's my favorite tweet of yours. Lynn Wood says he didn't read any of the documents before they were filed. Yikes. Now, when you say yikes, what does that mean legally?
It is a legal term from the Latin yike.
Donde los yikes.
Yeah, no, his defense was, really absurd. First, Sidney Powell saying I was never served. The lawyer for the city of Detroit, was holding up the document. It says, here's where it says I sent it by first class mail and by email. So Powell says I was never served. And then Lynn Wood says, I never read the complaint before it was filed. And I did not participate in the filing of it in any way. Yet his name appears on it. And as the judge pointed out, well, once you found out your name was on it in November, you've done nothing to withdraw your name from that lawsuit. Right. And so you can't come in here now, 7-8 months later, and disclaim anything. I mean, really, he was really running from it. Sidney Powell asked me to help her out, and I said yes, but I have nothing to do with this otherwise poison lawsuit.
Yeah, right. You said Wood throws Powell under the bus, says he offered to help Powell in the case, but didn't give permission to put his name on the complaint, which he did not read. Did you go on to say defense points out Wood could have withdrawn from the suit at any time, did not, that he is represented elsewhere, that he is part of the challenge in Michigan. Isn't that part of it? Is they're just so chatty outside the courtroom? I mean, but that's the whole thing, is there's a different standard in a court of law, right? They just would go out on the courtroom steps and say all these ridiculous, wild claims that they didn't say in court, correct?
Yeah, and that's where I hope that we see them get some comeuppance, that truth still matters in court. We heard Amy Berman Jackson say that when she sentenced Roger Stone, that in some places truth still matters, and in court it still matters. And that was what the purpose of the hearing was, whether they should be sanctioned, paying their opponents costs, and maybe even being referred for discipline or disbarment for abusing the court in this way. Rule 11 of the Rules of Civil Procedure say that a lawyer must exercise some due diligence and do some investigation. Yeah. And when they file something in court, they are certifying that they are doing so based on facts and law, and not for purposes of, harassment or delay or some other improper purpose. Right. So that's what the judge was trying to get to yesterday, is trying to find, in 6 hours, is there anything here that was done in good faith? And I didn't hear anything.
Yeah. Well, I love this is why you're so beloved, Barb McQuade, because you take legal and translate it into layperson.
Yeah.
You said Judge Parker, Wood's claim he was not involved in the lawsuit appears to be an after-the-fact assessment. Translation, you just made that up. Then you said, now plaintiff says delay was caused by converting a document to Word. This is the lawyer equivalent of the dog ate my homework. Court politely says, I've heard enough on this topic. Yeah, it is, because, as lay people, we watch this and go, is this as ridiculous? And then in a very, highbrow legalese way, you say, yes, this is as ridiculous as you would think. So we just, Jenna Ellis that's one of the Trump lawyers, has just quit the GOP live on TV because they didn't do enough to defend the honor of Donald Trump. She said, what happened to the millions raised by the RNC? The Trump team never saw a dime of that help. All of them, including Ronald McDaniel, should resign now. Until they do, as of today, I'm resigning from the party. A compromised, corrupted majority is not a majority worth being a part of. Well, that's a giant loss. So they're all basically throwing each other under the bus, right? All this new reporting, the books are just everybody's. But even the RNC basically said, this will be laughed out of court. This is ridiculous, right? The RNC obviously didn't want to be involved in this.
Yeah, their lawyer, there's reporting today that talked about how their lawyer thought that they were really undermining their own credibility by going down this path.
Right.
And, I think he's right. And that his allegiance is to the party and the people who are members of it and not to Donald Trump. And, it really is, I think, an indictment on the party that it lost its way during the 2020 election, to say the least.
Yeah.
I mean, their platform for the 2020 convention was not any specific policy position, but whatever Donald Trump says. I mean, in a country that prides itself on being, a country based on the rule of law and not on any one person, that really is falling astray. And so maybe that at least some have some shreds of integrity and want to restore their party and move on from Donald Trump.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk about this, the Trump organization. So the latest is the throwing under the bus of Alan Weisselberg has begun, right? He has been removed as officer of several of the Trump organization, I guess, subsidiaries. This is a 15-year tax fraud scheme. So that, without even asking you, that seems bad. So he's worked for the Trump family since 1973. He's expected to remain at the company, but has been removed as officer, right? So I'm okay. I don't want you to worry, though, Barb, because Don Jr. and Eric are in charge, so what could go wrong? But one expert was saying keeping a CFO in place post-indictment generally isn't realistic for companies. How are insurers and lenders going to rely on what the CFO tells them? So I guess that in that sense, it's not unusual, but it just seems part of Trump's... He's going to be a coffee boy soon, right? And he won't know who he is or whatever.
What's his name? Alex?
Yeah,
Alex?
Somebody? I don't know.
Yeah.
Where do you put the... I mean, I always thought I thought that news and that a lot of this came from the daughter-in-law, these actual documents and things. So where do you place this case right now in terms of, because I know there's been a lot of talk of Weisselberg flip and yada yada. What do you think?
Yeah, well, as we know, loyalty for Donald Trump is a one-way street. And so, ousting Alan Weisselberg is no surprise, although I will say it is not unusual in this circumstance, even if this were any company in America. Even though a person who under indictment is entitled to the presumption of innocence in criminal court, that's not the same when it comes to lenders, customers, and others. To see someone who's been indicted for, especially with a detailed indictment like this about a fraudulent scheme, it may be that their directors and officers liability policy does not cover criminal activity. So there are a lot of business reasons that you would remove someone, at least temporarily, while they're under indictment. He's also distracted. He's got to focus on that. And then from a very personal perspective, there's always the possibility that he's wearing a wire. And so if he has an incentive to cooperate, do you want him participating in the meetings where they're discussing the most sensitive decisions in the company? Probably not. So this kind of thing is not uncommon.
Barb McQuade, you saucy legal minx. That is just... might be wearing a wire. Okay. Now we're off into Sopranos land. But I just wanted to know, how unusual or not is this? A family member helped prosecutors crack open the tax fraud scheme at the heart of these indictments. Reading from this latest reporting, while investigators battled Trump's lawyers in court to get the tax records, his longtime accountant's former daughter-in-law held incriminating documents she was more than happy to turn over, but prosecutors didn't learn of that evidence till last year. What investigators didn't know is the proof was in the hands of Jennifer Weisselberg, the woman once married to Barry Weisselberg, son of Alan Weisselberg. It wasn't until November 2020 that city and state investigators connected with her to acquire the evidence. Just curious your take on that and why that is true, because I think people have said in this case, it's the documents that's easier to prosecute, right? That you would like Weisselberg's help, but you don't even necessarily need it. So she supplied that, and then the tax records backed up what she supplied, correct?
Yeah, well, it's highly unusual that you would get this from a family member. Now, of course, she's divorcing and has some interests adverse to the family. And so that always brings with it some baggage. If she were to testify at a trial, people might be skeptical about her testimony, that she has some axe to grind against the family. But of course, as you say, when it's just documents, it's difficult to fabricate those. You can lie about certain things, but the documents themselves don't lie. And so if she was able to provide those things, that can provide a lot of leads. I mean, that's the beauty of a white collar case typically, is it relies less on human witnesses and more on documents. Although, and one of the reasons it is likely prosecutors would like to flip Alan Weisselberg, it is useful to have someone who's in the room to help connect the dots or point the way to leads or explain motives, to serve as a narrator for a jury. Even if you have these documents to really make the case, it is useful to have someone to tie it all together, and it's likely that that's what prosecutors are pursuing.
That is known as the Hamilton prosecution, in the room where it happened. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I guess so.
All right. So yeah, in that sense, it strikes me like Michael Cohen, that you say, oh well, he's a liar, but obviously everything seems to have been backed up that he said by documents and these other developments. No.
Yeah, and he's been used. He says that he has sat down with prosecutors on numerous occasions to share information. If I were the prosecutor, I'd meet with him, but I would verify everything he has to say, because he clearly has an axe to grind, and he's often been out there talking on television, which really does kind of diminish one's value as a witness. As you just said earlier about Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood and others, when they start talking too much, they're out there on the courthouse steps or on social media or on their own podcast or whatever it is, they tend to say a lot of things that may contradict other things that they're saying. And so they can lose their value as a witness if they talk too much. And Michael Cohen is kind of in that category. But nonetheless, he can provide leads. If you can back up what he says with documents, he can explain things. He can tell you about things you might not have known about before. So there's definitely value, even if you don't call him as a witness at a trial.
Yeah. Okay. Wanted to get your take on some of the Capitol rioter suspects. A Pennsylvania woman who allegedly stormed the Capitol and told a police officer to bring Nancy Pelosi out here now. We want to hang that bitch. Has filed court documents claiming she is divinely empowered. She has divinely empowered immunity from laws.
Oh boy.
Okay. She's a serious legal expert. She's taking this seriously. And what experts describe as an inadvisable legal strategy, Barb. She demanded to represent herself in court, appeared to threaten a court clerk with prison time, and declared herself a self-governed individual with special legal privileges. She does not simply appear in court. She says, I am here by special divine appearance, a living soul, she told the judge. I do not want an attorney. I do not stand under the law. Under Genesis 1, God gave dominion over the law. How's that all going to go, Barb, for her?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is not the first time that someone has asserted this kind of defense. There's this group of people who call themselves sovereign citizens. They say they're not a citizen of any state, that they are, their own sovereign. It frequently arises in the context of tax protesters, people who refuse to recognize the authority of the federal government to impose tax. And so therefore they haven't paid income tax in years. They won't look at the flag. They'll turn their back on the judge and other kinds of things. But the first test would be to determine whether she's mentally competent to stand trial, which means that you understand the charges against you and that you have the ability to assist in your own defense. It's on her to put forward any insanity defense if she claims that she, lacked the capacity to understand the wrongfulness of her job. Other than those things, she will go to trial, and the prosecution will present its case, and she can say, all these other things, and the judge will instruct a jury on the law. And if the elements are met, then a jury will, try to follow the law and make a decision about her guilt. So it mostly ends up being a great distraction and time waster in court when people assert these things, but it's not unheard of. And prosecutors have ways to try to address them and minimize the disruption.
So legally, what happens if she is asked, are you competent to stand trial? And let's say her answer is boogity, boogity cheese. Like, how does...
Yeah. Then that she would get an expert to examine her, so that, you can't fake it, so that someone would put her through a battery of tests. It may be that a trial is delayed until she can become competent. It may be that she can undergo treatment to restore her to competency. But at some point, if she can't stand trial, the charges would be dismissed. Now, if she is so incompetent as to be a danger to herself or others, then civil commitment proceedings could be initiated.
All right. Well, one last one. Eric Swalwell's battle against Mo Brooks takes an unexpected turn. Judge asked the House counsel to weigh in. A federal judge has asked the House General Counsel's office to weigh in on that part of the unusual member versus member litigation. What's your take on all that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's I think that that lawsuit about the January 6th insurrection is serving an important purpose. I think that it could very well be at the end of the day that the civil lawsuits do something that criminal charges may not be able to do. I know Donald Trump has asserted First Amendment rights to say the things that he said on January 6th. And I think he may have included just enough buzzwords in his statements about being peaceful and the like to avoid the very high standard that was set by the Supreme Court about inciting violence, having a purpose of inciting violence and a reasonable likelihood that it would occur. But in a civil context, where the level of proof is simply preponderance of the evidence as opposed to beyond a reasonable doubt, it could be that Swalwell and others' lawsuit there has a higher likelihood of success than criminal courts. But
interesting.
Regardless, I think it will be useful to make sure that it stays in public focus and we don't get to sweep it under the rug and talk about a normal day of tourists visiting the Capitol.
Sisters-in-Law is the new smash hit podcast with the four most fascinating women in the world. Joyce White Vance, who like me is a distracted new mother. She had a chicken that gave birth to new something. That's all she's talking about. Barb's got to pull more than her weight. Kimberly Atkins and Jill Winebanks, who we just found out was a legal advisor on Fatal Attraction. I don't understand why Fatal Attraction needed a legal advisor, except to go, is everything she's doing illegal? And Jill says, yes, that's all illegal. And Barb McQuade, who, of course, Wolverines, long live rescue dogs. We are always thrilled when you take time for us, Barb.
Thanks, Stephanie. My pleasure to join you.
All right. Sisters-in-Law, get it, the new podcast. Thank you.